What's the absolute worst thing that could happen to an athlete? Think about that for a minute. Now, what if I told you that no matter what your answer was, it's nothing compared to what happened to 19-year-old Monica Seles? In fact, it was so terrifying that even after 3 long decades, that incident still sends shivers down the spines of the tennis world. So, let's take a trip back to the 80s, when Steffi Graf was dominating the women's tennis world. And when I say dominating, I damn well mean 8 Grand Slams in a row, a 66-match winning streak, and 377 straight weeks at the #1 spot of the WTA ranking. Now that's a record a lot of folks can only dream of. So no one, and I mean absolutely no one, would have thought that Steffi's reign would be interrupted anytime soon, and much less by a 5'4" teenager who came out of nowhere. That teenager was Monica Seles. You see, Seles officially turned pro in 1988, when she was just 14 years old. It was that same year that the American took the court by storm and knocked the mighty Steffi Graf off her throne with a 7-6, 6-4 win at the French Open. For Graf, it was the first time in 3 long years that she'd ever lost a tournament final. And for Seles, it was the genesis of a career that not only put her at the forefront of women's tennis, and believe it or not, that record still stands to this very day. And when you analyze Monica's playing style, it's easy to see why she was such an unstoppable force on the court, even against the mighty Steffi. Monica paired an aggressive baseline play with a double-handed backhand that had the power to disorient her opponents in the blink of an eye. Combine that with her excellent footwork and speed, and Monica was unstoppable. Over the next 3 years, the American bagged a total of 22 titles and reached the finals of 33 out of 34 tournaments she entered. Monica Seles literally had the world at her feet, and she was just 19 years old. And to top it off, she also won 8 major Grand Slams, including 3 Australian Opens, 3 French Opens, and 2 US Opens. And in March of 1991, Seles successfully began her reign as the #1 WTA player. A reign that would come crashing down in the most traumatic and devastating way imaginable. April 30th, 1993. Monica took on Magdalena Maleva in the quarterfinals of the Citizen Cup in Hamburg, Germany. The match was supposed to be a warm-up event to prepare her for the clay court season at the French Open. Just as you would expect, Seles was leading the game 6-4, 4-3 at the end of the first half of the match. The players were given a minute to catch their breath, and what was supposed to be a routine water break turned into the most horrifying moment in tennis history. Not very many people got to actually see what had happened. So, for most of the 8,000 people in the arena, their attention was caught by a loud scream and a man in the stands being forcefully held down. Monica Seles had been stabbed. Armed with a 10-inch long knife, the attacker launched a vicious assault, targeting Monica's vulnerable spot. The blade plunged between her shoulder blades, penetrating her skin to a depth of 1.5 inches. Now, if that's not the scariest thing tennis has ever seen, I honestly don't know what is. Monica herself vividly recounted the terrifying attack in her gripping 2009 autobiography, appropriately titled, "Getting a Grip." In her own words, she shared the chilling details. "I remember sitting there, toweling off, and then I leaned forward to take a sip of water. Our time was almost up, and my mouth was dry. The cup had barely touched my lips when I felt a horrible pain in my back. My head whipped around towards where it hurt, and I saw a man wearing a baseball cap. At first glance, it seemed like the attack might have been politically motivated, as Seles was born in Yugoslavia and could have been easily associated with the Yugoslav Wars. But the reality was actually very far from it. You see, athletes and their fans have one of the strongest bonds in the world, sometimes even stronger than most folks' relationships. But as beautiful as it seems, things can also get pretty ugly very fast. And this turned out to be one of those cases. It was a twisted case of an extreme tennis fan that took his love for his fave all the way to crazy town. The attacker in question was 38-year-old German Günther Parscha, an unemployed factory worker who was a huge Steffi Graf fanatic. So much that he even went to the extreme lengths of purchasing a VHS recorder just to capture Steffi's matches and replay them over and over again. And when Seles knocked Graf out of the #1 spot, this dude was upset. Very upset. Now, that's an insane level of obsession, right? And what's even crazier was that folks who witnessed the whole thing play out testified that the guy actually looked deranged. I mean, look at him. Anyways, Parsh revealed that he had become suicidal after he witnessed Seles defeating Graf for the first time at the German Open in Berlin in 1990. And to top it all off, his hatred for Monica only doubled when she eventually overtook Graf's hold on the #1 spot. Parsh wanted to see his idol, Steffi, at the #1 spot again, and there was only one way to do that: take Monica Seles out. Thankfully, the blade missed her spinal cord and didn't damage any vital organs, so the wound didn't exactly put Monica's life in danger. After a few days in the local hospital, the American star hopped on a plane and flew all the way back to the United States to complete her treatment. According to the doctors, Seles just needed 3 months to get back to smashing opponents on the court again. Sounds great, right? At least there was hope at the end of the tunnel. Or maybe not. It took 2 very long years before we ever saw the young star on the court again, because that injury was just the tip of the iceberg. Monica's journey back to the court wasn't a stroll in the park for a number of reasons, but on the top of that list is that Monica Seles was robbed of justice. You know, in any functioning justice system, the general principle is that the punishment should match the crime. So you would think that the law would come down hard on someone who almost ruined the career of one of the greatest tennis players of all time. But unfortunately, Monica's case is a vivid example of how criminals can slip through the cracks without breaking a sweat, while their victims are left to deal with the aftermath. Because after being tried in court, Parsh somehow managed to dodge a charge of attempted murder and only ended up with a 2-year suspended sentence and probation for aggravated assault. After the initial disappointment of Parsh receiving a lenient sentence, Monica decided to fight back. She appealed to retry him for the crime, hoping that this time justice would finally prevail. Surprisingly, the appeal fell flat again, but Monica didn't stop there. She also took legal action against the German Tennis Federation, claiming a lack of security and seeking compensation for lost income. And if we're being fair, it seemed like a no-brainer, right? I mean, come on, if they had proper security measures in place, perhaps the whole nightmare could have been prevented. Well, guess what? The court didn't see it that way. They dismissed her lawsuit, leaving Monica with yet another bitter pill to swallow. And as if that wasn't enough, fate decided to add another layer of heartache. Right after the attack, Monica's father and coach got hit with some terrible news. He was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, players on the women's tour were given an opportunity to vote on whether to maintain Monica's ranking given the unique circumstances she was facing. And in response, the decision was a firm no. As if the physical and emotional recovery weren't challenging enough, Monica now had to deal with the crushing blow of watching her hard-earned ranking drop. By the end of the year, Seles' ranking had dropped to number 8 in the world. These were undeniably the darkest times in Monica's life. It was like her entire world was crumbling in on her, and all she could do was watch. If this isn't the most tragic thing that could have happened to a 19-year-old, I don't know what is. But hey, if there's one thing Monica Seles proved to the world in her prime, it's that she perfectly embodies the true spirit of a fighter. So with every setback, Seles' resilience grew stronger. Instead, she embraced the challenge, knowing that the true measure of a champion isn't found in victories alone, but in the ability to rise from the ashes. So, in August of 1995, the entire world stood still as Monica made her way back to professional tennis. And in just 1 year, she had proven to the world that she was still that 16-year-old that had knocked Steffi Graf off her high horse when she bagged the 1996 Australian Open. So there you have it, folks. Monica Seles' story is proof that setbacks aren't game over. They're nothing more than a bunch of little detours on the road to something even greater. We're curious to hear your comments below on that statement. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more interesting things about your favorite tennis players.